So everyone, you are here for a real treat. In the background, you can see Harry Litman standing against the wall of the Denver airport. Do I have that right, Harry?
Yeah, I found a corner where no one seems to be caring, although we'll see whether anyone jumps out. But yes, you'll hear those stray announcements as you always do. But I'm here and clean and ready to talk, Adam.
Well, the reason for the emergency that on a connection for his flight, Harry has decided to do this, and thank you, Harry, for that.
Yeah.
Is this really crazy affidavit that was just unsealed out of Fulton County that it would really help to have a federal prosecutor's insights because as a legal journalist, I didn't know until today that a federal prosecutor could go to a magistrate and tell me if I'm summarizing this at all inaccurately. We have two statutes for which the statute of limitations have lapsed. We don't know who may have violated them. We don't know how they may have been violated, but we believe there is probable cause that a crime was committed on a conspiracy that we cannot articulate uh, based on a bunch of rehashed conspiracy theories about the 2020 presidential election. But even setting aside the 2020 election and those kooky theories, did I accurately state what this affidavit presents? And have you ever seen an affidavit ask a federal magistrate to find probable cause without being able to articulate any of those things?
Yes, you stated accurately. No, I have never seen a magistrate do it. Look, I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into this 22-page affidavit, but it's not a mystery that something really would have jumped out at the magistrate, even beyond the obviously recycled, vague, and internally contradicted allegations in the document, which is this stunning paragraph 84 at like page 22 at the end that says, if these actions, that is, different ways in which there may have been deficiencies, as is the case in any election office, were intentional, then there could be a crime. Uh, excuse me. If you're asking what a federal prosecutor does, this is not what a federal prosecutor does. If a federal prosecutor drafts an affidavit like this and takes it to a supervisor, they have their head handed to them on a platter and promptly. Where exactly is the crime, Mr. Glassfeld? And what are you asking a magistrate to believe? So we'll double back, but let me say this is extremely irregular. I've never quite seen such bare bones deficiencies. And the mystery had been at first, what did they possibly present to the magistrate? Now there's a new mystery, which is how did the magistrate possibly green light it? And you've probably looked into this. I know I have. It's not. You might grow in these uh, difficult days for some supposition that we have a magistrate who, as unfortunately we know a few judges are, very much in the pocket for Trump. That seems out of the question here. I've looked into it, talked to people there. This is a well respected magistrate, criminal justice system for many years, former defense lawyer. So it's just completely baffling. And let's keep talking. But I just want to give you a little bit on the process. You have an affidavit nominally drawn up, but you draft it as an AUSA. You go to the magistrate, you find the magistrate, and you have a conversation. And the magistrate looks at, well, what's going on here, and where's the and could the magistrate have not reached paragraph 84, which says, if there's a solar eclipse tomorrow, there might be evidence of a crime. Where's your evidence of the solar eclipse? It is so fundamental, and we'll get more to this, but it's also in a pretty damn big case with pretty worrisome consequences.
Absolutely. And to your point, Judge Salinas, as I understand, was the former president of the Atlanta branch of the Legal Aid Society. So
That's right.
with a reputation that everyone was wondering what was presented
Yeah.
before that made her sign off on this. But let's just get to a kind of threshold question. If the statute of limitations has expired, and Fulton County is arguing, yes, these are two statutes with a 5-year statute of limitations. Just set the election conspiracy theories aside and everything else. They're alleging violations of a crime where the statute of limitations has ended. Should that have ended it before even getting to any other question?
Of course, and because you must have evidence of a crime, and something done, say, in 1915 is not a crime. That said, Adam, one of the two statutes proffered here is a current record-keeping requirement, and you can imagine the argument that that is ongoing. As for the more elementary one that is definitely music to Trump's ears, the one about that basically just recycles all these completely discredited suppositions about the election, including some of the discrediting in the actual affidavit. The normal way to try to extend that, but it's not from the affidavit, is conspiracy. So you can, I think, maybe read paragraph 84 to say if the conduct was intentional and if there was a cover up and if there was an agreement and a conspiracy, then there could be evidence of a crime. Probable cause, this is nothing to so arcane, means that the elements of a crime, there's probable cause to believe they were satisfied. This is, the whole first 20 pages. I can see how they would have flummoxed a magistrate. There's technical and arcane and a lot of kind of doggerel. But then you come to the payoff and you have that if clause and you sort of faint away at disbelief.
Right, and there's no opposing party here. She's only hearing the government. If
Yeah.
she's and so I'm gonna when our conversation is posted, I'll include a link to the affidavit so everyone can read it themselves. 85 paragraphs, and this is an exact quote that they based on my training and experience and the facts as set forth in the affidavit. There is probable cause to believe violations of. They cite the statute have been committed by unknown persons. So they don't name a person, they don't have a theory of a person. There are 85 paragraphs. Look for some sort of theory about how a crime is committed. It doesn't appear anywhere in this affidavit. And to Harry's point, and I'm going to give it back to you, Harry, after this one, you mentioned all these if clauses. Paragraph 10. If these deficiencies were the result of intentional action, it would be violation of federal law, regardless of whether the failure to retain records or the deprivation of fair tabulation of a vote was outcome determinative of any particular election or race. And so, again, this big if there were a violation of a crime and it was intentional, we'd have probable cause for a crime. Did you see anything in here that would justify the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, being on the scene in Fulton County?
Well, that's a whole nother problem, of course. That's a separate irregularity, and that was bizarre in its own right. And you saw Todd Blanche trying to back away from that. But I just wanted to return to this process. It's barely conceivable that if all you have is unidentified persons, but you know exactly what they've done, you've got a videotape of some of conduct that you can infer is intentional. It's not but what would happen in a US attorney's office without fail is like, "Excuse me, person's unknown, go back with your agent and know those persons or don't come before the, magistrate." I mean, it's also this is, speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, this was completely irregular and originated by an election denier who is totally in Trump's camp. But again, we've had a bulwark that has worked well all through this road. We haven't even considered, and that's what made this so vexing and so mysterious, that the magistrates who sit to be sure and have enforced the barrier before of you better have some probable cause before we I don't even know what they're supposed to do now, who they're supposed to arrest, etc. So this could never pass muster in any sort of normal process within a U.S. Attorney's office. There's just it's not so it's a lot of gobbledygook, including recycled allegations. But the core deficiency is not such a mystery. Where is the evidence of the crime, and what kind of bad day the magistrate was having that she didn't sort of ask or press that, and knowing as we all it's pretty clear that if Trump or the administration can get these materials. They now see 700 boxes. The potential for making mischief in the election is grand and grotesque. So it's not like a vaporous indictment for a bank robbery. It's big stuff and really, completely unsettling. And I think they'll try now. I mean, they made it clear last week with Trump, we have to nationalize the election. They want to go to 15 states and do this. Now, any new magistrate who saw this kind of affidavit would say, there's no probable cause here. Get out of here, guys. But still, this one is quite the foreboding precedent. You know that there's a motion afoot from Fulton County officially. They've now joined it, and the highest officials there saying, and we've seen this before from Donald Trump, from Dan Richman in the Comey case, give me back this evidence. You had no right to it. So there's the possibility of collateral review and remedy, but the system assumes that the magistrate's determination is really pretty, that's the protection. And that protection seems to have failed abjectly here.
I actually spoke to the Fulton County Commissioner, Marvin Arrington, about this, and he had said in no uncertain terms that the chain of custody has been broken,
Oh, right.
and that, even if they win the return of these documents, it's kind of, you can't put Pandora back in the box, was the analogy that he used. You made a point there, Harry. I want to point out the sentence in the affidavit. The FBI criminal investigation originated from a referral sent by Kurt Olson, presidentially appointed Director of Election Security and Integrity, and other Orwellian nomenclatures.
Yeah, perfectly said, right? The whole title tells you kind of all you need to know in Trump 2.0. Right.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
And Kurt Olson was one of the big lie lawyers in 2020.
Right.
His cases fell apart, none of them advanced. But of course, he's in charge of this thing, and it makes one I would hesitate to use the word wonder, because I think it's actually pretty certain that this is the start of a playbook, and this won't be the first affidavit of its kind before a magistrate. So to the point that you gave, Harry, the kind of mischief that can come of this, regardless of the outcome of the litigation to get the ballots back, what's at stake when they get this information?
Yeah, this really is in 2026, it seems to me, Adam. And a lot of people have written about this, including Mark Elias. It is the keys to the kingdom. We saw in 2020 and 2021 an effort to make different kinds of claims depending which jurisdiction, like Fulton County, I just need 11,780 votes, are in play. But you have this information. You can make all kinds of allegations about vote fraud, about classes of voters, about potential misconduct by ballot officials, the very sorts of things that you rev up and have and create foment some chaos. And remember the infamous line from 2021: just say there's a fraud and my Republican congressman will take care of the rest. That really is the playbook. And as you say, this is someone who underlies the entire effort. Who really, if you look at this affidavit, it just says their allegations, their allegations. If oh, by the way, these allegations, no one has said intentional conduct, but there are allegations, and if these allegations A are true, big if, and B, are the product of intentional conduct, as they have to be under the federal code to come to be a crime. Otherwise, it's sloppiness, which is gambling in the casino, as you say. And finally, your point that now, as Fulton County is saying, it's a whole mess that they have preserved, and now God knows what state these records are in. But in any event, that is not a crime. That is not a crime. Oh, this name was blacked out. Oh, this thing wasn't preserved. Even if true, there's no allegation of intentional misconduct, meaning there's no allegation of a crime. No allegation, much less probable cause, which is a low standard to be sure,
Right.
but it's something.
Such a good point. There's no one is accused of anything anywhere
Right.
in this affidavit. No one's identified. There is no conduct that is described in any kind of particularity here.
That's right.
It's just saying if this happened and we think that there was some shenanigans given all of these theories that we've aired and have been rejected. Uh,
6 other problems too. It's overbroad. They let him seize everything. There's, not, even I just was envisioned myself going into a supervisor with this draft and just having my head handed to me. It's deficient in such elementary, respects. And again, a magistrate approved it. It doesn't mean others will, but just this precedent alone in a pretty big county, right? Fulton County, seat of Atlanta in Georgia. That is a leg up for guys who are truly looking to make trouble, which means in this case to subvert free and fair elections, as all indications are it was in Georgia back then. And also to, by the way, to your statute of limitations point, even if they can state it, it's quite clear out of the Constitution. The probable cause has to be fresh, has to be something that you've seen recently, and there's not even an effort to make that claim. It is really like you could use it as an exemplar for teaching FBI recruits and AUSAs how not to write an affidavit because everything is missing there. And here we are with 700 boxes having been carted away by the feds.
Right, and they got it past the goal line, as you said. So this particular one, we see Kurt Olson, one of the big lie lawyers in the
That's
wings.
right.
Another headline from today: a federal judge rejected one of Harmeet Dillon, the head of the
Right.
civil division for the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, excuse me, and that she was one of Trump's big lie lawyers herself, and she's going across the country. This is her third failed effort to obtain voter information through the civil process. She has fallen flat. Every court that has heard a motion to dismiss has rejected her attempt. And now the first attempt on the criminal side has been successful in the early stages. What does that set up for the ongoing fight to claw it back? Yes,
Yeah.
maybe the damage here, the Pandora's out of the box, as Commissioner Arrington said in Fulton County. But if the court stands the line here, maybe a magistrate somewhere else will look at what's happening in Fulton County, Georgia, and say, "Oh, I need to apply a more exacting standard."
Or the legal standard, maybe. But, we saw this when Trump was able to persuade Cannon to have a whole process. Generally, the law is you go through the process. But another way of getting at the question that you asked, Adam, why do they want it so much, or what can they do with it? It's so clear they are indefatigable in their efforts. You mentioned Harmeet Dillon, but remember Pam Bondi goes to Governor Walz and says, "Well, we'll take our boot off the neck if you just give us all your voter roll stuff." There is a very alarming meeting of secretaries of state coming up. They've all been invited by Harmeet Dillon, where they're basically going to be asked to cough all this up. So the criminal versus civil, the criminal should be a higher standard. It was and not met here. But the big thing is just that they have their mitts on it any way at all. And once they do, then they sit back, see how the returns come in, Maricopa County is kind of, oh, we've got some machines there. Up Fulton County, they want to assemble a kind of smorgasbord of problems that they can then use to foment a chaos and then be the departure from standard processes.
That's such a good point that this is a whole of government effort to have, Pam Bondi. Just today, I saw Todd Blanche
Right.
using the phrase House unselect January 6th. She just spent,
The putative House Unselect Committee, right?
right.
I
And
you know,
it just,
they're just relitigating the past, but there's no probable cause there. I'm sorry, I'm all pissed off in Denver airport here. I'll try to
no,
be better by the
uh,
time I get home.
no, that's I am glad that we found this
Yeah,
Substack Live to channel that rage that I am feeling as well.
yeah,
So,
always,
and thank you for breaking it down, Harry. I know that you have a connection, so I'll
yeah,
leave it at that. Is there any kind of final thoughts on this as we head into more of
yeah,
civil and criminal uh, barrage
yes,
of
yeah.
efforts to get their mitts on voter data?
One good point, one bad point. The bad point is, as we saw by the exception that proved the rule with Cannon and Mar-a-Lago, it's really hard to claw back once a determination has been made. You don't go to another magistrate to second guess. You assume this low threshold has been met. On the other hand, Trump has identified 15 places they want to go after. There's no reason to think that the 14 others don't undertake completely independent examinations. I don't think it's a precedent. We just saw this terrible decision from the Fifth Circuit, right? In this ongoing issue, you've probably covered it with your viewers on All Rise Media, but that could have an influence on others. This should not. So that's the good feature. But as you were just mentioning, they're trying in every which way to get a hold of this stuff. And when you think about it relative to how elections work today, it is a tool to do all kinds of mischief.
Mm. And we'll leave it at that. Enjoy your second flight back home. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
about this more. For folks tuning in right now, if you missed a lot of our conversation, you could find it on All Rise News and also subscribe to Harry Litman's Talking Feds. You can subscribe to both of us. You'll find an alert when our conversations go live.
And
I'll
by the
talk.
way, when you see that alert from All Rise News, something's just happened, and 9 times out of 10, you're hearing it from Adam and not from others. So that's why I always love doing these Substack Lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. I love our conversations and I look forward to the next one.
Bye-bye from Denver.
Have a good flight.